Okay, guys, it is 8:01. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, welcome. Today, we're going to be going over introduction to 3D printing for polymer clay, specifically people interested in doing polymer clay cutters. We're going to talk today about what 3D printing is and whether or not polymer clay cutters building is right for you. So that said, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you're watching the replay, welcome, welcome. We will also include several different links in the email as well in case you miss any of the information going through the PowerPoint. So today, here's what we're going to be talking about. Of course, we're going to have our introduction. We're going to go over what is 3D printing. 3D printing supplies exactly what you need to start making your own polymer clay cutters. We're going to go over some basic terminology. I think a lot of times people get intimidated when they hear certain 3D printing jargon, so we're going to go ahead and address that today. We're going to also go over the pros and cons. We have a very special announcement. We do have a bonus offer to share with you guys at the very end, and then we're also going to answer all of your Q&As at the very end of this webinar, so stay tuned for that as well. So that said, I would like to go ahead and introduce myself. Hello, my name is Catherine. I am the owner of Lunar Love Design Co., as well as the founder of Clay Party Headquarters. I have been working with polymer clay maybe 4 years now. And I initially started out with purchasing clay cutters, but I realized very quickly that it was kind of a pricey venture. So I decided to buy a 3D printer used, and it took me months before I finally got a successful print. But once I did, I decided to start selling the cutters, and I ended up actually quitting my job about 8 months in to go full-time with polymer clay tools, parties, all things polymer clay. So that's just a little bit of my story. And then Alex, we would love to hear about you.
I'm Alex. I run the Pudgy Art Bandit, where I also sell clay cutters. I've been designing clay cutters for a little over 2 years now. It took 9 months of trial and error to get a good cutter. Lots of hair pulling and sweat, tears, and blood to get a good cutter. So I'm really excited to talk to y'all today, and that's just a little bit about me.
Yes, and even the blood part, because I think I've had splinters with 3D printing when I first got started.
Yeah.
So first things first, what is 3D printing? So 3D printing is just the true terminology is additive manufacturing. And basically that's just a fancy way of saying that we're taking a material and we are building layers upon itself to create a 3D object. Now you'll see here that there's some children tinkering with a 3D printer. So I just want to share that 3D printing is gaining more and more popularity. In fact, it's even in schools. They now have programs where they are teaching these kids how to build 3D models, and they get to print their own creation. So it doesn't take it's not a rocket science kind of thing to do 3D printing. There are definitely some tips and tricks to get successful prints. Otherwise, it is definitely a road of trial and error to make sure that you do have successful prints. So that said, we're going to continue. What are the perks of printing your own clay cutters versus buying them? Well, first off, you don't have to worry about shipping cost, and you don't have to worry about shipping at all. It's pretty nice knowing that you can have a cutter within as soon as maybe even 20 minutes, as opposed to having to wait a week, sometimes even longer, to have cutters arrive at your door. You also get the flexibility of creating different sizes. I know for me, when I ordered cutters, I thought I was getting one size, and then it would come to my door and it's like, oh, if I could only just have it a little bit bigger for my project. So when you're printing your own cutters, you have that flexibility to say, you know what, we're going to increase the size a little, or maybe we're going to shrink it down a little. It's also going to give you unique designs. This allows you to bring any image that's in your head, and I'm going to show an example here. Hopefully it comes through. I had this image in my head and I decided to turn it into a cutter. That's pretty cool, being able to open up your creative outlets by saying, you know what, if I can think it, I can make it.
That's that also opens you up for, I got so many requests for custom designs, and if it costs $20 to have somebody custom make a cutter for you, it's so much more cost effective to be able to turn around in a week and have that custom earring for them.
Oh yeah, and you know what's crazy, and it even runs into my next one here, with it being so cost effective, Just out of curiosity, I'm really curious to see. I would love to see in the comments how much you think it costs in materials to make maybe a cutter like this size. How much do you think it costs a maker in filament to make something like this? Because granted, we'd probably pay $6 for this cutter. It depends on what provider you're getting. I just want to see a couple comments. How much do you think it cost to make a cutter like this? I'm gonna wait for a couple to come in. 50 cents. Okay, that's pretty close. Pretty close. So yeah, 50 cents. Okay. Alex, what we actually find ended up being about the average cost for a cutter this size. It wasn't even
30,
50 cents.
I think it was like 25 cents, 30 cents.
Yeah, I think it was 25, 30 cents for a larger one. And then for something more petite, it ended up being 6 cents.
Yeah, I have this itty bitty little bunny cutter right here, and we did the math. It was 8 cents.
8 cents. So it's unbelievable the amount of money you will save when you are printing your own cutters. All right, so that's some of the pros when it comes to printing your own cutters. That said, so what do you need to print? You need 4 things. You need 1, a 3D printer. 2, you need some kind of material you're going to be melting down essentially. So we call this, most of us call this filament because most of us use filament. You can use resin. It's a little messy, a little toxic, but you need some kind of something to melt down. You need an STL file, and then you need a slicing software. And we're going to go over all that. Don't get intimidated by the verbiage. So let's start off with the 3D printers. Now, 3D printers will range in price. They can be as low as $90. They can be all the way up in $9,000. The good thing is you don't need a $9,000 printer at home to print polymer clay cutters. Here are some of the most common brands that you'll hear more about. I am familiar most with 3 of these models: the Ender, Prusa, and Bamboo. And I'm going to go over those 3 models because they've served me at different points in my journey as I've learned how to 3D print. And now I feel very strongly towards one printer that I feel like is the best printer for beginners. So we're going to touch into that. So the first one I'm going to go over is Ender. A lot of people hear about this. This is one of the I think more well-known at-home and expensive printers, especially a couple years ago. I think a lot of the newer models that you see, competitors are very much trumping the Ender nowadays. Ender was ideal a couple years ago. Nowadays, I don't think it's the best printer on the market. However, I will go over some of the pros and cons of this. So if you like to tinker, you are someone who likes to tear something apart and build it back up, Ender is the one for you. If you like to tinker and you really want to get your hands dirty, you will learn so much about how a 3D printer operates with an Ender, which has both its pros and cons. Now, typically you can get an Ender for about $200, maybe a little less, and you can get some Enders, they go up in price, but your basic model is about $200. I do have issues with bed adhesion, and it's a very slow printer. It will take probably about 45 minutes to print just your basic cutter. So now we're gonna go into the Prusa. This used to be my favorite cutter, or my favorite printer, and I really liked how fast it printed, and I like that it's a plug and play. So basically, it arrives, you assemble just a couple pieces, you plug in, you start printing. There's really not a lot of tinkering because it has so much software in it that it's very user-friendly. However, the con is it's a higher price point. Your smallest model, the smallest price point you're going to get for a Prusa is going to be about $459. And it's shipping from the Czech Republic. So these take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to arrive. So it's an investment and it will take a while for it to arrive. I was very gung-ho about Prusa. I have 3 of them. However, I have since changed my tune, and this is where I'm going to say my favorite 3D printer is a Bamboo. Hands down, it's one of the newer competitors on the market. They are competing not only by the fact that they know that they're fast printing, they are plug and play. You can literally plug it in and you will have a print. I mean, by the time I unboxed it, how long did it take you, Alex? By the time
I had mine up and running in 10 minutes. It
yeah.
was insane.
I was quite amazed, honestly, by it. It has Wi-Fi capabilities, so you don't have to have a cord constantly attached. And which is crazy. This is how competitive it is. They actually have it to where you can stop and start the print from your phone. So you can be controlling a print in another room. You don't have to sit there. It has a camera and it's attached to your phone. Um, what's also really nice about this is the price point. It's $250, about half the price of a Prusa Mini. Um, it's just,
Also, mine got here in 3 days. Like it was that blew my mind.
yeah,
You might not always get it that fast, but I was really impressed with that too.
yeah. Mine came in about 2 or 3 days as well. I was really surprised how quickly it arrived. But some of the cons with bamboo, let's definitely talk about that. I feel like it has a weird, funny sound. Me personally, I feel like it sounds like an old video school game. It does a weird jingle and it's kind of loud when the head's moving around. But that's just me. I'm really sensitive to noises. And you also have to use their slicing software. It's free. It comes with the actual printer and it is very user friendly. It just takes a little bit of like walking through to get the hang of it. So those are my two cons. I love it so much. I now have two bamboos, and Alex, I don't know how many bamboos you have now.
I have three now.
She's got three now in the matter of a couple months. Like we completely fell in love with bamboo. So this is our favorite 3D printer. It's the Bamboo A1 Mini. You guys want to write that down. There's also a code here that will automatically take you to their website that you can hover with, I think, your phone.
I'm also dropping the link in the chat if anybody's interested in checking those out.
Yeah, and we're going to hit you with a lot of information. If you are registered for the replay, we're going to send this out via email and we'll include all the links. That way so you can reference back, because I know we're going to hit you with a lot of information. So first one we said was 3D printer. Number two item that you need is the material. So like I said, there's tons of different materials out there. We prefer PLA. That's the one that you'll see most common with polymer clay cutters. Resin also does a really great job of getting a lot of detail with their polymer clay cutters, but it requires a lot more setup. You need much more ventilation, and as you know, resin can be toxic. So you just want to make sure you're really paying attention if you decide to go with a resin printer and a resin material. So PLA is our favorite, and we'll just go real quick over our favorite PLAs. Mine is eSun. I get it in the color warm white. I love it. I think it's $20 a spool. So this whole thing you see here is what we call a spool. So that's about $20, and that gets me, I don't know, like 80 cutters. I can print 80 cutters with one of these. I get it off of Amazon. You can get it off Amazon. And then Alex, you said yours was the Overture PLA Plus.
Yep. And it's like a salmony color. I can't actually pronounce the name, but I really like Overture. I've gone through a lot of different filaments. And Overture is about $26. I can get it sometimes on sale for 22. But I definitely find it worth it. So
Yeah, and that's one of the things too, is sometimes you'll different people will have different preferences on different filaments. I've tried a few different ones. Hatchbox I also like, but I feel like eSun for me has just been the most friendliest. But there's all different types of brands out there for filament. You just choose the one that's for you. But our suggestion goes.
I also really like Bamboo's filament, but I haven't played with it a whole bunch that I can like fully recommend it. But if you end up getting a bamboo printer and you're like, well, let me just go ahead and add some filament because they are cheaper.
Yeah.
I do love their matte colors. So
I have a couple boxes. I need to open them up and actually start printing. I'm still working through this spool, but I need to test it out. All right, next question. What is an STL? Because like I said, you need those 4 items to start printing. We've gone over a 3D printer, a material, so next you need the STL. So an STL is basically a file format that helps map out a shape. Consider it like the blueprint of an object. And we're going to go through the steps of that. I don't want to get you guys hung up on the jargon, but basically it's a blueprint of an image. Let's say I have this Monstera. I need an STL file, just basically a digital file that is then going to be sliced, and it's going to send a G code, which is basically going to talk to your printer, this guy here, and say, hey, I want you to print it at this temperature. I want you to print it at this speed. So that's all that a G code is it's talking directly to your printer on how you want the printer to print your cutter. And what's nice about this is it sounds very labor intensive when it comes to the G code. However, most of your slicing software has preset parameters. And like I said, most slicing software is free. So Cura, Bamboo Lab, Prusa Slicer, All of these are free. And then you would essentially drop your STL file, your blueprint, into this software, and it's going to kick out a specific code to tell your printer, hey, this is how you're going to print this cutter.
It sounds really intense, but it really isn't. Once you do your first couple, you're like, oh, okay, this is nothing.
Yeah, it
You feel
honestly,
really fancy knowing all the
yeah,
terms though.
yeah, you do sound very fancy with all the terms, and it the software does it all itself. It's kind of like it's as easy as Google Translate. You type it in, Google translates it, and you're like, well, I can speak this language, but the software is doing all the work for you. So don't let it intimidate you, and we can answer questions at the end as well. All right, so like I said, you need the STL, right? Where can you find an STL? Several different places. One, you can buy them on Etsy. I've seen them as low as 99 cents. I've seen them as high as $6, I think, for an STL. Some of your favorite cutter makers might actually be selling STL files. So you can actually get their cutters printed right at your house. So check with some of your favorite cutter makers. They might be selling their files. You can also go to a website called Thingiverse. Thingiverse has a lot of different files. And then you can also make your own cutters. And that's kind of what we're talking about today. There's so many perks with making your own STL cutters that then you can turn your STL files that you can then turn into cutters. But before we get started, what makes a good clay cutter, Alex?
So this is an image of one of my clay cutters, it's a little dinosaur. I believe a good clay cutter has a sharp blade, which anybody who uses polymer clay and clay cutters knows like a sharp blade, it makes all the difference when you're making earrings.
Yeah.
Um, you want a good depth so that the clay doesn't stick into the cutter. You want sturdy walls so it's not breaking when you push down on it. You want that chamfered blade, which I wasn't really familiar with that word until just a few months ago, but it's that kind of sloped edge that pushes the clay to the outside of the piece on the inside.
I don't know if this will
Um,
show up.
yeah,
But
you can kind of see it sloped there.
yeah,
Um, Embossing details, if that's something that's important to you, which I really love all the cutesy type designs. So the embossing details are really important to me. And then also the rounded handle edges make a good clay cutter so that when you're making a ton of earrings, you're not, getting those lines in your hands from pushing down on those sharp edges and everything. Just makes it a lot more comfortable to work longer.
definitely. And I think it takes time to get a good quality cutter. I don't know about you, but it took me a while to have it figured out. My very first cutters were full. I mean, they were so bad. It was like a big old blob. It didn't cut in the clay. Half the clay ended up stuck in the cutter. So it definitely took me some time to understand how to build a good STL file, and how to work my printer essentially. So grateful for the technology today. So grateful for Bamboo Labs. But that does lead me into Alex was kind enough to share some of her very first uh, cutters, if it wants to pop up. There we go. It's popping up. So I am too embarrassed to show some of my very first cutters, but Alex is not. So she's going to share some of her cutters when she was first getting started, when she was still trying to understand how to make STLs and starting her 3D printing journey.
So I was absolutely tickled when these came off the printer, but as you can see, they would not make very good earrings. This little bee cutter was actually supposed to be a cookie cutter that I had scaled down, and I had to put like 4 layers of like thick clay to get it to cut. Because and then this one in the middle, you can see it's so stringy and it was huge. It was like 2 inches, and you can see all the clay stuck inside it. And then that one, the die, you can see around the edges, it did not cut clean, and it's obviously a stamp and cutter set. So, that would have taken me forever if I used that to make earrings.
Yeah, but yeah, we definitely all started somewhere. It's definitely a learning curve at first, especially when you don't have the knowledge going in and you're kind of winging
Mhm.
it. Otherwise, you'll end up with so many failed prints. I mean, these for a beginner are actually quite good. Mine, when I very first got started, they were not even this good. So it definitely takes some time if you're going to try and self-learn how to do STL files for 3D printing.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many prints I had where it was just like a string of spaghetti mess because I had no clue what I was doing.
I hate that. Which leads me into this. So, if you are interested in learning how to do your own STL files so that you can print your own cutters, we have built a easiest clay cutters course, and that is going to introduce you to how to make STLs fast. I mean, in as little as 2 minutes. It's not going to take you 3 hours like it took us when we were very first getting started. It's going to give you lifetime access. So you're going to be able to reference back to all these videos. Anytime you have an idea, you're like, ooh, how would I do this? You can reference back to those videos on how to build a cutter. We're going to teach you how to easily create images. You don't have to be a skilled drawer. You don't have to know how to work Adobe Illustrator. We're going to show you the easiest way to get your images into a cutter. And you're going to learn tips and tricks. You're going to learn the tweaking of slicing settings and things of that nature. And all of these cutters, like I said, are done, and they were done very fast. And what I mean by fast, okay, so here's an example for you, just to kind of share with you how quickly you can be making cutters with the right knowledge. Draw it. So let's say I wanted to create this triangle here, this beveled edge cutter. 60 seconds to draw a triangle. Boop, boop, boop. And that's even generous. 60 seconds. It's going to take me 60 seconds to build the STL file. It's going to take 60 seconds to slice it, because like I said, you're just taking that file, you're sending it in this software, and it's going to automatically boop, G-code for you. And then it's going to take about 15 minutes to print on your actual printer. So in total, you can be printing cutters in under 20 minutes, depending on how big it is. Obviously, certain cutters that are larger and more detailed, it's going to take a longer print. But the process is still going to be the same. So I just want to put that in perspective, how quickly you could be printing. So let's go over kind of like, what would you do if you were printing your own cutters? Well, first one, like we said in the beginning, you're going to save money. You can sell them, you can gift them, or you can use them yourself. I challenge you to think about, or even reference back, how much money you've spent on cutters in the last 12 months. Like I said, I put in my very first order of cutters, and it was about $80, I think, for 6 cutters. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, there's no way I can afford this. So I know some people, they buy cutters regularly. So just consider and maybe write it down, maybe go back to your Etsy orders and see how much money have you spent in the last 12 months on cutters. Number 2, what could it do to your creative outlets? If you could come up with an idea and within an hour have that shape, how many more doors would it open for your creativity? You know, it could be a certain shape, certain style. These earrings right here in the middle, I told my husband actually doodled these. I gave him a piece of paper and a pen, and I said, draw me a random shape, just close your eyes. And he drew this weird little squiggle rectangle with I don't even know what that is in the middle. It kind of looks like an hourglass. And I was like, okay, let's make it a cutter. And these ended up being such a beautiful earring. And just because I have the freedom to now take any image and turn it into a cutter. So think about what designs you would create. Maybe there's something that's popular in your area. Maybe you got, you're in Maryland and like crabs are very popular, or is it horseshoe crabs? Different states have different things.
Yeah.
Is it crabs?
Yeah.
But you can make a unique crab cutter. But think about all the new shapes that you would be able to create. You can do creative DIY kits. So as we know, cutters can be kind of pricey. I like to make DIY kits and sell them in my local boutiques. I also sell them online, but you could be doing DIY kits. And these are just ideas that you could do. I mean, there's a long list of things you could be doing when you're printing your own cutters. You could also be doing parties, and I'm a huge advocate for polymer clay parties. Like I said in the beginning, I love Clay Party Headquarters. I'm the founder of Clay Party Headquarters, and there is such a market for people looking for experiences outside of just your standard painting a canvas. And when you can teach people how to work with polymer clay, and you're taking out the expense, the cost of having to print or having to buy 6 of every cutter, you will save so much money, and that can open a door to financially as well. So if you've ever thought about doing clay parties, I would encourage you to check out Clay Party Headquarters. All right, Q&A. So this is where we're going to go through some of the questions and we're going to answer them. Someone asked, is this in Fusion 360? No, it is not in Fusion 360. I have a little bit of beef with Fusion 360 just because it takes hours for me. It took me hours in the beginning to create my own cutters with Fusion 360. So, and I don't like how expensive it is. I think it's, I think 300 annually for it. So, yeah, I'm not a big fan of Fusion 360.
We had someone ask, does it use a lot of electricity?
I wouldn't say so. Alex, you have the most printers printing. Have you seen how many printers do you
Um,
have going?
I have 9 printers going, and I've only noticed an uptick of about $40 a month.
Okay.
Um, which, for 9 printers, that's not much at all.
How many hours do your printers run each day?
Oh, all the time,
All the time.
24/7.
Yeah, I would say mine are pretty consistent. They're slowed lately, but I haven't noticed any kind of, my husband hasn't been like, why is the electric bill so high? Thankfully, like I don't think they use very much electricity at all. No. Mia commented, is the bamboo is really that easy to set up? Yes, the bamboo really is that easy to set up. I just got a second bamboo in. I'm gonna do a video recording of it and post that on YouTube probably in the next week, just to show people step by step how to set up, plug and play your 3D printer. Bamboo, super easy, and that's for the A1 Mini. They're all essentially the same though, plug and play or plug and print as they say. What if we can't draw? That is a great one. What if you can't draw? So, Alex, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, so in the course, I do go over how to draw. I primarily draw on my iPad on Procreate, but I will have other means of drawing just because I know, an iPad's not accessible to everybody. But
Yeah. No, that's a great one.
you don't have to be skilled at drawing to be able to make your own cutters.
Yeah. Um, string. Okay, someone said, how do you keep from getting the stringies like on the boba? So that's going to come down to one, having a good STL, and then how you are setting it up in your slicer. And I think we have that included in the course of our like recommended slicer settings. It takes a while to kind of fine tune sometimes, like the temperature, how fast it prints, things like all kinds of little terminologies. But if you have a good slicing setting, it takes care of the stringies on the boba. So, and we'll definitely include that, or that is included in the course as far as our favorite settings. We can only attest though to the Prusa and the bamboo. If you want, we'll throw in the slicing settings for those two. Is it the same idea if you're wanting to print texture rollers? So it's the same idea in the sense of it's going to use the same material, it's going to use a 3D printer, but the STL build is going to be very different. I would not, the course will not go over how to print texture rollers. That's going to be a more advanced thing. It will go over how to make cutters, as well as how to maybe make a 2-part cutter, different sizes of cutters, emboss cutters,
Stamps.
stamps, yeah, stamps. But as far as a texture roller, that's going to be a little bit more advanced. We would consider maybe adding something to that down the road, but I think for beginners, I think that would be a little too overwhelming as far as the actual texture rollers. But you can do stamps. Stamps work just as well for creating texture, just back and forth, and then you don't have to worry about clogging inside the roller. Will the course be constantly updated, or do you pay for what it is on there now and updates will cost extra in the future? So we're including everything you really need to start printing cutters easily and fast. Now, if you want to get very intricate, I think Alex is going to have a very in-depth Fusion 360 course, but that is something that is really going to be for like advanced level. The beginner easy STL course is going to cover everything you need for cutters. There really won't be much of a need, I think, for any updates. It's gonna, I mean, it's pretty all-inclusive. This is exactly how I've been making my cutters the last 2 years and how I've made my business essentially. So I'm taking all of that knowledge and giving it to you guys. So I don't really think any updates will be needed for that. Good question though. I like that. All right, I'm trying to look. We got a lot of comments. All right, guys, I think we're gonna go ahead and start to wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for coming. I'm gonna go ahead and we will share the link so that you can access that page. That's another another fun one. So thank you guys so much for joining. Make sure that we have your email. We will get this replay out probably within the next 24 hours. And then as well as a link in case there's any information that we covered that maybe we forgot to put up. But thank you guys so much for being here, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend. Bye, guys.